Okay, well, thank you very much. As you all know, I'm Clara. I have a PhD in neurotrauma, and I've worked in the consulting industry for almost 10 years, mainly with product design for various companies. And through this work, I really sort of discovered some of the challenges around head protection and head injuries and cumulative injuries in sports. So that was really the beginning of Brainware, where we're trying to help organizations with some of the challenges that they're facing around brain injury. So today, less than 50% of concussions in sport are actually diagnosed and treated. And this leads to complications later down the road. Once you have one concussion, you're 4 to 6 times more likely to have a repeat injury. And this leads to mental health issues, particularly in youth and adolescents. And it's estimated that 1 in 3 amateur athletes will develop brain disease from this cumulative head impacts. Today, what most organizations use are observations from the sidelines or self-reporting from athletes, which are really limited to subjective interpretation. And this is really why most concussions are not recognized. The only real tool are wearable head impact sensors, but they come with many limitations in terms of lost connectivity. They treat impacts as isolated events, so they don't really have that cumulative load, and they require a lot of maintenance, worn properly, very expensive. So we haven't seen a huge adoption in sports unless if you're a professional league, and primarily we've seen them in Europe mainly. So in most organizations, all of what would be considered a subconcussive head impact is not monitored in sport. And with the increased awareness and research around all of these long-term repercussions, we are seeing that leagues and organizations are under increased pressure from the parents and the media to both fulfill a moral and societal obligation, but they're also seeing decreased rates in their registration and participation. So they rely on, their clientele for revenue, and so this is affecting their revenue streams. So what we're doing at Brainware is we are reimagining how we can monitor and manage brain health for sports participants. And particularly, our technology is a head impact monitoring software that only requires game video. So we essentially provide objective and real-time feedback by detecting and tracking players and head impacts throughout the game. And then we use AI to automatically analyze live game video and extract some key features that we need to calculate the severity of the head impact by predicting what's happening within the brain. We have a real-time notification so that we can notify of high-risk head impacts, but we also track multiple head impacts, essentially tracing the history of the athlete so that we can better inform around safer play strategies and implementation of policies around safe play. Our business model is essentially an annual membership subscription. The cost will really depend on the needs of the organization, as well as if they are in the private or public sector. But the main sort of purpose of this is to demonstrate that we do have a membership subscription that will really be tailored to the needs of the individual. For example, if you see in like the Huddle sports analytics company, they do this depending on how much, what the needs are of each customer. So our market is really driven by 3 things. So as I mentioned, this increased awareness and research. Multiple health institutes have acknowledged the link between repetitive head trauma and brain disease. So not only chronic traumatic encephalopathy, but early onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So the NIH really sees this now as a public health priority, which is adding pressure. We also see a really rapidly growing sport tech market. It's expected to grow to $79.2 billion industry within the next 10 years. And so we see a large adoption of technology in sports. And also the behavior around sports participation. a recent survey indicated there was a rise from about 50% to 91% of parents concerned regarding concussions, and this happened within just 3 years. So the sports market is growing, particularly mouth guards. So we really see this around the accelerometer mouth guards being adopted, estimated to be 4.9 billion by 2028, and continued growth in player tracking and the sports analytics markets. So we've estimated, based on 700 million youth registered in what we would consider a high-risk sport in North America and Europe, our TAM is 31.5 billion, and this isn't including the participants in the school board. So we estimate almost 40,000 schools. Our 5-year market plan is to expand sports and geographical location each year, starting in ice hockey in Canada and then moving on to other sports. We're starting in ice hockey because it has a smaller community and they're a bit more receptive to changing how they monitor and manage brain trauma. And so we believe this would be a nice test bed for our product market fit before going into the larger markets. And in terms of our market strategy, initially, we're going to be depending a lot on our networks and partnerships. We've been in this space for one of our founders for like 30, 40 years. So this is really where we're making a lot of our connections and talking to the user base. Our competition, which isn't listed here, which really be the self-reporting that I talked about, which really isn't working, as well as some of the larger organizations have spotters. Also, like, these are people behind the scenes looking for signs and symptoms. We also see this on numerous occasions not working. But probably our biggest competition would be those wearable sensors that I mentioned, which are expensive to implement and require hardware. Whereas our technology is really more accessible, it's easy to use, it's invisible to the user, and we don't require any hardware maintenance. We also are backed by science, so we use the gold standard in research to develop athlete-specific risk profiles, so that's very dependent on the sport and the level of play. And also, because we are agnostic technology, this allows us to be affordable at a price point at about 4 to 11 times lower than our competitors, which makes it a bit more accessible for scaling on a global scale. So you've already met me. We have 4 other founders. Blaine Hoshizaki is world renowned in brain injury and sports. And he's also held executive roles with CCM and Bauer, and has been a contributor to both of their sales, reaching almost $1 billion. Co-founded 2 startups and has about 22 patents. Ryan is our technology and research innovation manager, and so he has really done a lot of research in turning ideation into product development. Allison is our data science and AI expert, specializing in convolutional and deep neural networks. And then Gwyneth is sort of a combination of the two, really expert in biomechanics and human motion, and using large data sets to incorporate that into product design. I just wanted to show here quickly that we have 2 advisors. Robert Cantu, so he is a neurosurgeon, but also co-founded Concussion Legacy Foundation. And this is a nonprofit that has a lot of reach in the US with school boards and organizations that really promote smarter sports and safer play for young athletes through education and innovation. And we also have Adam Perelman, who is a software engineer at OpenAI. He's an ex-CTO of Affinity Inc. And this is because we've really, we have a lot of expertise around data science and human motion and AI and brain injury, but we don't have a computer scientist. And so he's really contributing in terms of helping us hire that those expertise and looking for the data set the skill set that we require. We've spoken to many organizations within the space, and a lot of what we are hearing is that what they're using isn't working, whether it be through just sideline assessments, or even some of these organizations are using sensors. And so the sort of general message is that our technology is something that they're looking for, and something that they see where the future is headed in terms of technology. And we have three specific school boards. So Prince William Public School, Riverdale Private School, and District School Board of Niagara that are all interested in being early adopters of this technology. For our milestones, so we currently have patent pending that quantifies brain trauma using 2D video, and this is in the form of a PCT, so it's a global provisional patent. And we're aiming to complete our ground truth data set in ice hockey by the end of this year, and looking to hire 2 personnel, a computer scientist and developer, beginning of next year, so that we can validate the technology for ice hockey in terms of a working prototype, MVP, and we're aiming to beta launch within a year of that, and public launch within 15 months. We're seeking $1 million in investment to give us about 12 months of runway, the 2 new hires that I just spoke of, and complete our validated ice hockey data sets and finish our development. We believe this will get us to beta launch, and we do plan to incorporate or leverage some of the government funding in terms of OCI. There are 2 funds that we would qualify for if we had a lead investor. And that is everything. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Clara. Nick and Marisa, I'll let you take it from here. We have about a few extra minutes because Clara was a few minutes short, so that's great for feedback and questions.
I think you might be muted.
I have a first question, Clara, just to clarify how the product works, and this is part of the feedback. So you're using 2D video from existing video footage of the game in question to be able to analyze the impact that took place?
Yeah,
right?
so we can, the intention is that technology can use either existing game video or live game video streaming as it's happening. And what we do is we detect when a head impact happens, and then based on some of the features around that happens, we can predict what's happening within the brain.
Okay. So, okay, that's helpful. That first part of feedback for me is to be able to articulate that and show that in a clear way at the beginning, so people understand what the product you're using. When you say 2D video and you actually show a picture of a brain with red and are they analyzing the brain? Like, it's actually not clear that you're using in-game. You did reference it, so I thought I got it, but it wasn't 100% clear. So on the product side, I would make sure that you're a little clearer on that. You might give an example of something, an image, a quick little, animated GIF of a video that shows, impact, and saying, for instance, AI would be able to look at this, see the head flick back in some ways to be able to glean and put up a little, automated watcher kind of red flag or yellow flag to be sent down or be able to be passed down. And then I think for this one, you need to talk about a little bit of how this can be proven a little bit. Like, you've talked a little bit about that, but how you've been able to demonstrate this actually works, that there is a strong probability and correlation between what you're able to catch and what you won't be able to. So to give confidence that, okay, this is something that's going to be this AI broad range screening tool that's going to be able to catch all of these things that weren't previously maybe caught. And anything on I don't think there's any regulatory things here, but you might touch on that, of things that could jump in that could be part of the process. For me, the big part of this one is what is, like, you've touched on the TAM, but your TAM's really big. Like, you're comparing things that aren't really there's a difference between TAM total addressable market and serviceable addressable market. Like, what is the real budget that's available to you in the years ahead that you can go after? There are things you've included in there in the TAM that are not parts of the budget you can address. It shows to you're demonstrating the importance of health in sport and analytics in sport and raising game, and how organizations are investing in this, which is great. But in terms of, hey, how many people are going to actually spend money on this and where are they getting the budget from? I think you've got some work to do to really narrow in on what your initial ideal customer profile is. Just saying hockey is not enough. Like, are you focusing on junior levels? Are you junior A hockey? Are you OHL college, or are you professional? And my feedback on this is there will be resistance at every level for different reasons, because the earlier you are in the journey, the junior A minor hockey association, you will be in some ways better received, because if you end up sitting a player, even though as a safety precaution, even though it's a false positive, right? Like that they didn't actually have symptoms, and maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but they sit for a couple of games or that type of thing happens, that type of league will accept that. If you're going to the OHL and you're telling a 17-year-old potential first-round draft pick that they've got to sit down, and their agent and their parents and their GM or have a big Saturday night game, and this is a showcase for them, which might impact millions, like, it's concussion, right? You know, the movie, you're starting, as soon as you move up the chain, you're going to run into competitive pressures that say, wait a second, you're not 100% sure you're right. You're 90% sure, you're 80% sure. And then you've got this all of a sudden resistance of folks saying, wait a second. I'm sure you've thought about, you're in this space. You understand how organizations, the more competitive it gets, the more of a competitive disadvantage the early adopter can be to this. It's like, the first country that makes itself carbon neutral is at a massive economic disadvantage to the rest of the countries. And that's how I think sports teams, the further up the chain you're going to run into. So focusing on the leagues makes sense, because it needs to be sort of a broad base one, but the leagues are run by their owners. So you're going to run into some resistance. You might talk about that. You might talk about, where's that budget? Giving examples of organizations that have set aside budget, forward thinking organizations that are leaders, that have already set aside pilots, budgets to work with companies like yourself, organizations that are want to be seen as early adopters of looking after the health and safety of their players. And then that'll give you a little bit more about that'll give investors a little bit more feel for, okay, in the next year, I could see Brainware AI working with the Ontario Junior Hockey League, or working with, naming some different types of organizations that you can, in an ideal way, you'd have a reference or two to say, for instance, here's what this organization said. Like, if you're able to do this, this would be amazing. My observation, though, too, is that having kids in competitive hockey, and even at a relatively high level, things like Hockey TV, which are video, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's an AI program. It's not great. Like, it loses track of the puck. It loses track of players. It loses track of a lot of things. So if it's not a complete solution, that means it's incremental, but not replacing maybe the spotter, for instance. They still need a spotter and training and all of that. So
we got to do a time check on, Amy has enough time too.
Perfect. Yep. That's it from me. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, sorry, I to cut you off, because very valuable input. But Marisa, do you want to add?
Just quickly, Nick covered a lot of the points that I was thinking as well. And in terms of how it works, how easy is it to integrate? How easy is it for your customer to adopt it? Do they need special cameras? Or are you just going with what they normally have? Or, what does that integration point look like? I had the same question about the market. Which one are you? When I saw the slide about the TAM I was thinking, which one are you? And my last comment I'm going to say is, it's a very valuable product. I can see why someone would want it. This is important stuff. But what's the story? What's the vision? What are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day? So maybe telling a little bit of a story around that might be useful.
Okay.
Thanks, Marisa. Julia?
It's funny, because I really misinterpreted what you're doing in terms of video tracking. So Nick's question was right on at the beginning there. Is it just the impact that is determining concussion? Or I assumed, and just to see the difference. I assumed that somehow, you know, the way people held their head, you know, and you tracked it over a game, that you could tell that they were still suffering from a concussion. Because if it's only the incident of a concussion versus, you know, you can tell somebody is still suffering, because it takes a long time to recover from a concussion as well too. Who is the Nova Scotia guy that down in Boston?
Crosby.
Yeah, you know, he had, you know, kept coming back too early, and can you detect that as well?
No,
no?
so we're not diagnosing, and we're not looking at like your recovery period.
Yeah.
It's mainly, it's the event itself.
Event. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm going to add notes in the form as well too, and but the only other one question I had was you used the term hardware agnostic.
Yeah,
And
so
you don't use hardware, do you?
no, exactly. So we're strictly software, and the intention is to be able to incorporate this into any camera.
Any video.
But you know, the other ones were all wearables, so weren't they, or your competitors?
Yes.
So I don't know if that's the right term to use there, because you know, because you don't have any hardware, right? Per se, it's a video
agnostic.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's good. So, you know, just to change the term a little bit there.
Okay.
Thank you. That was great though,
Okay.
Clara.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your feedback. That's very helpful.